Greetings, my name is Don Alexander and I'm President and Managing Director of Gene Coda Professional and Executive Search. Our firm connects outstanding firms in the life sciences industry with executives who help bring game-changing products to the market. Before we get started today, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank LabRoots Drug Discovery and Development for hosting this virtual event. COVID-19 has changed the way companies operate, the way employees perform their work, and the way both are adapting to this environment. In this session, we'll cover both macro industry trends and specific changes, enabling attendees to gain a holistic perspective. In this presentation, you're going to learn about the current life sciences job market, best practices in recruitment, interviewing, and hiring, employee and candidate sentiment, and what I call the new normal landscape. So let's begin with an overview of the current life sciences job market. Our firm produces a quarterly report called Life Sciences Pulse. A link to this complimentary report can be found at the bottom of this slide. The Life Sciences Pulse report depicts all online job postings or advertisements for the life sciences sector in the United States over the past 3 years, including trending patterns and sector subcomponents. Please note that we will begin charging a fee for this report in the second quarter of this year, but you can presently download a copy and be grandfathered in for future releases at no charge. Online ads are a leading indicator in employment and the hiring cycle. As such, sector posting data provides meaningful market activity and direction that can assist business leaders in the life sciences industry to make informed decisions regarding human capital. So let's talk a little bit about our methods of data collection and analysis in this report. So data contained in this report was sourced from a company called EMSI, or EMSI. EMSI compiles an extensive sweep of all online posted positions or ads in the U.S. on a monthly basis, with the ability to review up to 4 years of prior data. EMSI's data is derived from quarterly updates of 18 billion data points curated from dozens of government data sources, as well as hundreds of millions of online job postings with filters by company, job title, skills, keywords, and more, offering a wealth of insight into the U.S. life sciences labor market. I think it's also important to speak about the U.S. life sciences sector overview and definition. EMSI categorizes industries by leveraging the North American Industry Classification System code, or what's commonly referred to as NAICS. While NAICS codes are considered the most reliable source of data and industry classification in the United States, there are occasions where industries may be overrepresented or underrepresented based on industry definitions. These issues most often occur where there's an attempt to capture high technology or emerging growth segments of markets that are not as clearly defined as, say, mature industries. To accurately define the U.S. life sciences sector based on product development, Gene Coda consulted the Techonomy Bio, Investment, Innovation, and Job Creation in a Growing U.S. Biosciences Industry 2018 report for guidance, and then reviewed the focus set of 24 NAICS codes found in that report. We then adjusted to 15 NAICS codes, which are listed in our report and deal principally with the product development side of the industry. Today, we're going to be reviewing the fourth quarter of 2020's numbers. The fourth quarter report hasn't been released yet, but it will be available at the beginning of February. So with that, let's take a look. The slide you're now looking at is a picture of all posted ads in our definition of the life sciences industry on a quarterly year-over-year basis, with the current quarter labeled in blue and the same quarter in the prior year in red. When reviewing Figure 1, we note that employers posted 537,982 ads in the life sciences sector in Q4 of 2020, and that's up from 492,606 ads in Q3 of 2020. We see that Q4 of 2020 represented an approximate 14% year-over-year growth or increase in ads posted in the sector, which was really, quite frankly, remarkable growth. As you look at the quarterly comparisons, please also note that the second quarter of 2020 represented the first full quarter of results in the pandemic timeframe, so when COVID began. Each successive quarter since Q2 of 2020 has moved, you'll notice, in a stepwise upwardly fashion, denoting a quarter where hiring took a pause in Q2 and then resumed its upward trajectory. So in this particular slide and picture, we'll take a look at some of the subsector components that make up the life sciences industry. From left to right, the red bar graph RTM stands for research, testing, and medical laboratories. The blue bar graph PMM stands for pharmaceutical, medicine, manufacturing. And finally, the green bar stands for medical devices and equipment. When you add these three subsectors together, they make up the entire life sciences industry as we've defined it in the report. We also find that for our audience, it's helpful to think about some of the industry companies or names, logos if you will, that make up each subsector. So RTM, for instance, example companies might include Laboratory Corporation of America, Quest, IQVIA, and Covance. PMM sector example companies would include Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, and Merck. And finally, the MDE sector companies might include Thermo Fisher Scientific, Medtronic, Stryker, and Danaher. So what insights and conclusions can we draw about the state of the life sciences job market? Number one, the life sciences job market has recovered significantly since the second quarter of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic really truly began. Q4 of 2020 was the second highest quarterly tally in the last 3 years. So a significant comeback in Q4 of this year. The medical device segment, or MDE, skyrocketed forward a stunning 27% from the third quarter of 2020. The pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturing, or PMM, segments and the RTM, or research, testing, and medical lab segments, each had healthy gains of about 5% each over this third quarter as well. So what do we expect near term? At a grassroots level, we're now seeing several companies adding key staff. Several companies we have spoken with are resuming hiring that may have been delayed during the pandemic, which will result in more near-term competition for talent and ultimately higher industry wages. Although COVID spread continues to remain a significant variable, with the election season now behind us, our expectation in Q1 is for modest growth. We expect modest upside in the PMM segment, more significant relative growth in the RTM segment, and maybe a little bit of cooling off quarter in the MDE segment from the Q4 2020 timeframe. After all, it's hard to beat a 20+% quarterly gain. So next, when we consider advice for candidates who may be actively interviewing, the Boy Scouts of America motto, "Be prepared," comes to mind. We suggest, number one, practice and rehearsal of both video interviews as well as potential presentations. Ask a friend to set up a mock interview and give you feedback, for example. Secondly, we want to make sure and check all of our technology. Check mics and video cam operations, including lighting, as well as internet connectivity and application download of the given technology, such as Zoom, and do this ahead of an interview to minimize the possibility of disruption. Thirdly, we want to always dress appropriately for a Zoom interview. After all, it is an in-person interview. We also suggest the use of a virtual background or professional home office setting. So companies, we find, tend to be more forgiving in video interviewing, given our present circumstances. But we do think that one still needs to be cognizant of what a background looks like or what their background looks like, as well as making every effort to minimize the chances for disruption, such as the dogs barking in the background. If you believe a potential disruption might occur, let the interview know as things begin, and explain how you've been able to make the shift from, or to rather, working from home in spite of potential distractions. Now, also, don't forget to turn off mobile phones or computer sounds that may be disruptive. Also, and we'll see this more, I think, as the 2021 year progresses, I would note on this that we haven't seen or had a candidate travel request really from a client since this past March, but I have asked candidates if they are willing to meet in person on client request, assuming CDC guidelines are followed as well. But do be cognizant that as the year progresses, as the vaccine is manufactured and distributed more broadly, that we may begin to resume in-person interviewing. I think that's important to think about. So when we consider how the need to work remotely has changed hiring practices or selection criteria for candidates, we note that more companies may seek insight on how candidates have effectively managed their work from home situations, especially if they haven't been accustomed to this in the past. Companies might inquire about the environment in which one has worked. Has this been primarily office-based? Again, pre-COVID, and ask about how an individual's managed to adjust to a wholly or primarily work from home environment. For example, a client might ask, if I understand correctly, you've been working from a home office exclusively over the past 6 months, to which you might respond. And then, what has been your biggest challenge in making that transition? And what have you done to overcome this challenge? Those are the kinds of questions that we may see in some of the interviews that we'll be participating in. Now, with respect to employee and candidate sentiment, we've seen a few key themes develop during the pandemic. First and foremost, people are not likely to relocate during the pandemic. So preparation for remote work initially and subsequent relocation is important to contemplate for both employers and employees alike. Second, people that are employed today are less likely to be probing the marketplace right now and tend to be more settled into their current work environment. Therefore, thinking about proactive outreach becomes very important when considering passive job seekers. Third, in terms of understanding work-life balance, we would encourage employers to understand that candidates and employees have now established a rhythm, if you will, that works for them and works for their family. So if they make a change, this could be disruptive. It's important to understand what this change might look like from a new employee's point of view. Finally, we are seeing that companies who provide flexibility, on-site, work from home, different requirements, different scenarios, but we're finding that the more flexible that the client employer is, the better able they are to attract talent. Now, when we think about the new normal and kind of what this might look like in terms of recruiting, hiring, and onboarding, we're really seeing several key themes emerge. The new normal for recruiting and hiring will include a candidate's ability to both interview and work remotely. And, that's going to be for a company's ability to help manage this new normal. For recruiting, we're seeing an increased use, I suppose, of virtual job fairs, as well as the use of various types of videos that would be shared with candidates. For onboarding, we're also seeing key themes such as potential temperature checks and COVID testing for on-site work. Again, this is organizationally dependent, but being aware that one's temperature may be checked and that one may be subject to COVID testing requirements is important. We're also seeing the use of tools like DocuSign used to onboard employees in a more efficient manner. And we're also seeing that employers are leveraging digital tools, handbooks, and information for training purposes, since a new employee can't readily ask their neighbor, quite as easily these days. And really what I guess we're starting to see occur, and this is what I would really consider to be a sea change in the work environment, is that many companies will accelerate their ability to hire candidates no matter where they're located. And we've already seen over the past few years a trend in this area, but COVID and the use of these video technologies has really accelerated this trend. Although there may be preference or requirements in some cases for candidates to be located in specific areas for specific reasons, such as being in the same time zone or having to physically come into a lab to perform various experiments, companies and employers alike will be able to hire a much broader pool of candidates, which is really good for both parties. A recent Zillow article stated that a switch to more telework could give 1.92 million U.S. renters, or 4.5% of renter households, the option to leave the metropolitan areas where they currently live and buy a starter home in a cheaper locale, and that close to half of U.S. workers are in occupations in which teleworking is at least theoretically feasible, though less than a quarter of these workers actually telework. So a lot of room to continue this trend. So a ramification of this new normal will be migrations from higher cost of living metropolitan areas, and we're already really seeing this now. Microsoft, for example, recently announced that it is allowing more of its employees to work from home permanently, and managers can approve permanent remote work. As companies in the tech industry follow suit with Microsoft and others, I wouldn't think that it would be long before the remote work framework encompasses a wider swath of the life sciences sector. So finally, I want to thank you for your time in attending this session and hope that you enjoy the rest of the LabRoots Drug Discovery and Development virtual event.